New polling from the Wall Street Journal shows that Vice President Kamala Harris is closing in on former President Donald Trump.
And it is my intention to go out and earn this nomination and to win.
She's essentially erased Donald Trump's lead that he had over Biden when he was at the top of the ticket. It wasn't just that voters out there had concerns about the Democratic Party's policies or how Joe Biden had governed over the past couple of years. In fact, it was very specific concerns about him and his perceived fitness for office based on his age. With Kamala Harris on the ticket, we can see that there are at least some voters out there who within a very short amount of time are now willing to consider voting for the Democratic Party and putting a Democrat in the White House when just a week ago they were not.
Here are the major takeaways from the poll. The majority of people say they are more motivated to vote with Harris stepping in as the likely nominee.
What we've seen in the public ever since Kamala Harris became the nominee, with how many big donors have pledged to her super PAC, with how many grassroots donors have pledged to her campaign.
You know how much money Kamala Harris raised in her first day of fundraising? Get this, she raised $81 million. That is the largest amount ever raised in a single day.
It really all together suggests that Democrats are just much more enthusiastic and energized to vote in a way that they weren't when Joe Biden was at the top of the ticket.
And that's especially important among Black, Latino, and young voters, part of the coalition that helped put President Joe Biden in the White House, whose support has been slipping in recent years.
It wasn't so much that Donald Trump was necessarily gaining support, but rather Joe Biden's support was slipping to a degree that suggested there might be some part of his base that might not come out on election day. Now what we're seeing is that Kamala Harris being at the top of the ticket seems to really have awakened those coalitions that put them in the White House in the first place. And you're not seeing quite as much slippage in support compared to 2020.
Should Harris win the nomination as expected, she would also be the first female nominee of color.
One of the things we heard a lot about just in our reporting was concern among some Democrats, even some Democratic women of color, of whether America was ready for a Black woman to lead the country. So in our poll, we asked people, does her being a Black woman of South Asian descent matter to whether or not they would support her?
The majority of people said that it wouldn't affect their decision to support her, but were less likely to say the same about most Americans.
It's essentially saying, I don't really care, but I'm not sure if other people will care. While there are some positive signs for Democrats in this poll, especially considering where they were when President Biden was at the top of the ticket, there are some positive signs for President Trump as well. And the poll suggests that this race is going to be incredibly close through Election Day.
About 51% of voters said that they approve of Trump's past performance as president.
That's the highest we've seen in our poll so far this election cycle.
But only about 41% approve of Harris's performance as vice president.
The fact that so many Americans view Kamala Harris's job as vice president negatively does help explain why the Trump campaign and President Trump himself have really tried to tie Kamala Harris, being Joe Biden's running mate, to his record and his policies on immigration and his stewardship of the economy, two areas that are really key for voters and areas where they think Donald Trump would be better if he were elected president.
A vote for Kamala is a vote for 4 more years of dishonesty, incompetence, weakness, and failure.
So I think you'll continue to see through Election Day, Trump and his campaign really try to convince voters that despite Kamala Harris being younger than Joe Biden, in their view, she owns his record just as much as he would.